Hello and welcome back to the Inside.Java Podcast, a podcast about everything Java, brought to you by the team at Oracle that builds Java. My name is Nicolai Parlog, and today's episode is the last one I recorded at JavaOne 2025, and it's a bit meta. Instead of looking at specific features, it looks at the bigger picture. What are the right problems to tackle? What are current and future challenges for Java? Why is predictability important for the platform? And what's behind the recent push in the learner and student space? As to my guest, I'll let him introduce himself at the beginning of our conversation. Enjoy the episode. So we're here with George Saab, and so when I talk about you to people who are not like super into Java, I usually say like, you can think of him as the CEO of Java. If Java were a company, he'd be the CEO. I think it's worth introducing yourself a little bit more than the other folks because, you know, Brian Getz and Stuart Marks, those are all like, you know, those people are like on the forefront of development. They give a lot of talks, they're all well known. I mostly just see you once every 2 years on a keynote.
Are you saying nobody knows who I am?
Yes, but nicer.
Okay, that's all good.
But seriously though, tell all the Java developers who I'm talking to here.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm George Saab, and I am the Senior Vice President for the Java group. I'm also the chair for the OpenJDK governing board. Mm-hmm. I've been working with Java for a long time. In fact, I've been working on programming languages since the 80s. I've been working on Java since 1996. So I joined, actually, I think it was on the same day as Mark Reinhold, what then was called JavaSoft. Mm-hmm. So, we were run as like a little small startup company owned by Sun. And then gradually the group was kind of pulled in as we grew. So I think when I started, there were probably about 30 people. Mm-hmm. And, by the time that I left Sun, I think it was about 5 years later. Yeah. We were, 1,500 or 1,800 or something. It had grown quite a lot very quickly. But yeah, I kept working on Java. I did a couple of startups in the Bay Area. Turns out 2001 was not really the best time to do that.
For the young audience, a bubble burst back then. Look it up, .com bubble.
Yeah. But then I ended up working for a company called BEA. Yeah. Who had acquired this group in Stockholm, Sweden, that was making a JVM. And the big bet there was that Linux and Intel would become big in the data center.
Not bad.
It was a pretty good bet. Some smart folks put that together. So I worked there. I worked with them for a while and ended up getting acquired by Oracle. And then about a year after that, Oracle acquired Sun. And at that point, the person who was running all of, sort of product development in Oracle said, hey, wait a minute, we've got a guy who has worked on Java, has worked with the Sun people on Java. And we got this Java group from Sun that, we love and want to nurture. We want to make them feel really comfortable. And so he asked me to put the group in Sweden and the Sun Java group together. And the rest is kind of history. So, yeah.
So I talked to Michael Witzet yesterday. You also referenced the Stockholm Java office. They're like doing lots of things, but one thing that they're really pushing forward at the moment is EGC, for example, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of good engineering going on there. Yeah, so let's talk a bit about, so we talked to, let's just say, we talked to Dr. Deprecator about what gets removed, but we also talked to Paul Sandoz and Brian Getz about what gets added. So that's all very language focused, but it's also very specific. It's technical, like, we have this use case, could be small, could be large, so we create this project or this solution. But I guess somebody, and I assume that's probably the buck stops with you there, gets to pick what to work on though, right? Because there's tons of things one could work on. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the way that the group, under your guidance, makes these decisions, what to work on, what to pick, what's important.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, I'm very pleased to say there are just such, talented and smart people in the group that, I don't sort of go around with an iron fist telling people what to work on. I think, we try to work very collaboratively. We have ideas that come from people in the group working on the technology saying, we think this needs to be better. We think there's an opportunity to do something over here. But we also try to look at the business side of it. A funny challenge that we see there from time to time is, sometimes when you talk with people who are using the technology, they're very acutely aware of the pain points they have today, but they don't necessarily know what was the saying. I think it was Henry Ford that said, if I had asked people the customers what they wanted, they would have said,
a faster horse.
Faster horses, yeah. So people can tell you they need to go faster, but they can't necessarily see the opportunities for how to bring that about. Yeah. And so I think that's one of the things that I feel, just amazingly proud of is the way people in the group are able to ask the right questions and, not be satisfied with just, let's put a little Band-Aid over here. It's more like, wait a minute, how do we get to the point where we needed a Band-Aid? What could we have done that could have made it, so that this is solved actually more in the root, area. And so basically, we tend to look at the trends. So in hockey, they say skate to where the puck is going, not to where it is.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Skate to where it's going to be.
I heard that before.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
But maybe from you, like in this context.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, and a big part of that is we try to look at, trends in hardware. Like what is happening? Like what kind of advances are happening that, 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, people who are writing Java programs will want to take advantage of. And maybe not only for new programs they're writing, maybe it's for the programs they're writing or running today. And, but how can we make it so that the JVM is smart and can take advantage of those things? A second thing we look at is programming models or programming paradigms. So, just like in many other things, there are trends here. One day everyone's going to do it this way. The next day there's a new, thing people are trying out, and everyone's got to do it that way.
I hear object orientation is dead for like 20 times now.
So I've heard.
Yeah.
But, really, it's true that when people do that, there's usually a reason. Right.
Yeah.
It's not, it's a trend, but there's also something that's driving that.
Yeah, it's usually like, I think there's often like original reason that pushes it. And when people who adopt this early are in the right place and they talk about how successful it is, and then there's a certain risk that then later there comes a bit of a hype or a trend that beyond that. But there's, as you said, there's probably good reason why people start investing into figuring out a new path of doing things.
Exactly. So, that's one of the things where we try to look at, are there things in Java that, help people do things that way? Or are there not? Are there things we could add? And, but I think one of the hard things there is, again, not to just do it as a Band-Aid, but to sort of think of what is the natural way to do this kind of thing in Java.
Yeah.
And so, with that, we see things like, adding lambdas so you can do a functional style of programming.
Yeah.
Understanding that, people want to actually do things more with data. So data-oriented programming leading to things like pattern matching.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think those are fun. And then very specifically, those were sort of abstract things with hardware and programming model. There sometimes are very specific things, like there's a particular kind of workload that has come up and everyone's excited about. Everyone wants to do. I could give you a few examples, blockchain, AI, you can name a bunch.
Blockchain already gone again.
But the thing is, sometimes those come up and then they go away.
Yeah.
But sometimes they come up and they stay, or they change form.
Yeah.
Right? So, we talk about AI today, but, if you squint at it a little bit, it kind of looks like an evolution of machine learning, which is kind of an evolution of big data. All of these things kind of build on one another. And so even in the cases where, something does go away, often pieces of it remain as value.
Yeah.
Right. And can be useful in other contexts.
Yeah.
And so here again, there are things that we can do in the language, in the platform, at the VM level to support those kinds of advancements. And so I think, that's really what we try to do, is not put in something that's a point solution to one thing that people are screaming for today, but look at it and say, this thing that people want, right? What is it that we can do so that the platform supports that?
Yeah.
And not necessarily as a narrow thing where, this is the only way to do it, but really to say, how can we make it so that, anyone who wants to build something like this could do it with the platform?
Yeah. I think a great example.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, please.
I think a great example was the section that Anna just did with Paul, which is, Java could probably just adopt like some machine learning capabilities directly to the language, something that's usable in that space, and we come up with the solution with the library or whatever, and then everybody has to use that. But instead, the solution chosen, the solution that Babylon is exploring together with Panama and these other pieces that fit together is, no, let's try to find a way to unlock the power of the community so they are able to build their solutions on this.
Right.
So we don't have a monopoly on like, this is the only solution that can ever be fast and you can build whatever, but it will always be 10 times slower because you don't get access to all the secret VM internals. No, let's create a way where these secret VM internals, this performance, what that's in that specific example that is needed, is exposed to everybody so they can build their solutions and they can be the competition that we've seen in web servers, unit testing frameworks, IDEs. Everything on Java has like a bunch of battle-tested solutions because they can be built and they can be in competition and
Yeah, and I think it's not only about when you say competition, we're kind of picturing this thing where there are 2 or 3 or 4 alternatives all for the same thing. But, something we tend to forget is Java is used in so many places for so many different kinds of things that, when people think of a solution like that, they're often thinking about the use cases they care about, right? The customers that they have. And they don't realize that, there are hundreds of, different things out there that are just like outside of their scope.
Yeah.
And sometimes the solutions for those could look very different, right?
Yeah.
And so when you have access to those foundational pieces, all those 100, things can be supported.
Yeah, that's a good
You
point.
don't have a one-size-fits-all necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's also interesting, right? Specifically, when it comes to evolving the platform and the language, every individual developer sees a certain slice, right? Like, let's say I do backend development and a little bit of home automation. Somebody else might do game development. It's entirely different, right? So we have different places where Java can be used. And then, of course, if we get a new feature, then maybe my niche, there would be a different local optimum.
Yeah.
But then would hurt everybody else more. So yeah, I can guess that's a difficult balancing act there. So what do you see as challenges that Java, the things that Java is currently adopting to? You also mentioned something like data-oriented programming and AI, for example, but maybe other things or larger things that Java is adopting to other challenges that it's seeing. For example, I heard about in the keynote about the exploration of Java in education. That's an important part. So what are things that you are looking at right now where you think that's where the puck is going?
Yeah. So I do think some of the things around Project Babylon and HAT that I think there's probably some talks at the conference about that.
Yeah. That will be published on the YouTube channel. Subscribe and like, blah, blah, blah.
There we go.
You know the drill.
Exactly. So I think those are very, very exciting. And, here one of the things that I think is really neat is Babylon seems to provide a good sort of, at an abstract, level of kind of general level, a way of doing code transformation, and HAT taking that and using it specifically for adding, really strong distributed GPU support. So that's the kind of thing that I think is very useful. And here again, if you think about that, that's sort of about understanding what kind of hardware patterns are coming, that are going to be available to many more people in the cloud or, even on machines that are close to you. And making it so that you can really take advantage of those. And, not take advantage of them by, having to go to native code with 20 different solutions for different architectures, but actually write your algorithm in Java and then have it, work.
I remember when I was in uni, which was let's just say a long time ago without going into details, I learned about GPU programming. And I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. So how do I work in Java? And I basically have to write a big string and dump it through some network. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, super elegant, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think you also mentioned learning.
Yeah.
That is, I think, definitely one of the things that we're very focused on now, because, we realize that there are new generations. There's a different, state of the art in terms of accessibility of a platform like Java. We want to make it easy for people to learn.
Yeah.
And attractive, right? And a big part of that, I think, is for people to see that they can achieve something and take, kind of baby steps to get there, right? I don't have to learn 32 principles of object-oriented programming to write Hello World.
Yeah.
Right? I can start with something fairly simple. I can have a sense of accomplishment because I've done that. And then I can go from there. And, it's not that we built 2 different versions of the language where you kind of fall off a cliff and you have to be swimming in the shark-infested waters, right? Instead, the idea is you successively can learn new things when they're there because you need them and you understand why you need them. And I think that's a very powerful thing because, rather than being confronted with all of this stuff, it's I need to find a way to do that. Oh my gosh, here's one right here, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense. Now I understand how that works and why it's there. So I think that's exciting. A neat thing though is this idea of, making Java more accessible to learners is not just about easier syntax.
Yeah.
Right? Not just about simpler syntax. We've also been doing a lot of stuff, I don't know, you may have had people talking about this already, with things like the Java Platform extension for VS Code.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't actually. So if you want to talk about
Yeah, I'd love to mention that. So I think that one's neat because one of the things that we see happening in a lot of school environments is students don't necessarily get, access to administrate their own computer.
Yeah.
They might be running something like a Chromebook or something similar where they've got a web browser and that's kind of it. And so, some of these in-browser editors have become popular for that reason. VS Code is certainly one of those that's super popular among youth. And so, what we see is that with the extension that we built there, it basically leverages Java C.
Yeah.
So it's not something where there's a completely different version that has to keep up with all the new language features. When a language feature is in Java C, then it can be leveraged in this and you can get access to it. So it's a sort of continually improving, continually moving thing, but very, very simple for somebody using VS Code to download and use. So it's the Oracle platform, Java platform extension.
Yeah, I think if you just search for like Java extension, I think it's the top one that comes up. Yeah, I think especially Visual Studio Code, I think it was Ron Pressler who, I'm not sure whether it was him though, who explained this to me, because I come from IDEs. To me, Visual Studio Code doesn't have the biggest pool. I already know how to use an IDE, so I use Visual Studio Code's text editor and stuff. So it's good program. It's a good tool. I'm not batching it. It's just like I don't need to use it as an IDE. I already know other IDEs. Yeah. And then people are of the persuasion, which I somewhat subscribe to as well, real IDEs are just more powerful as well. Should just learn the right tool for the job or the best tool for the job. But I think that overlooks that a student in a learning environment learns so many different things, right? Yeah. They're learning JavaScript, Java, maybe SQL. They're learning Python and AI stuff. They're learning so many different things. And they cannot be expected to also learn like 5 different ecosystems. So to them, figuring out, Visual Studio Code does 4 of those 5, it would expect a 5th, in this case, it may be Java, also to just work in it. And then not to support that would be a serious, downside of Java. So I think it's really good that that's going there. And then also what you said, that steps should be simple. I think it also expands beyond the language, where so many IDEs, so many testing frameworks, so many choices, so many JDKs you can download, so many versions. There's so many options, which is amazing for a complicated production environment, community and ecosystem that solves all these problems with Java. It's not great when you learn, though. It's really nicer when you learn with like 5 steps, and for each of them you just know what to do and don't have to figure out what even is a JDK, where do I get it from, and then I still have to run Java C. So we're seeing improvements there as well.
Yeah. And then I think going on from that to the learn.java site, which I'm sure you've been speaking about.
Well, actually, we see it in the keynote. So we streamed the entire keynote yesterday. So my excuse is why I didn't is that. So learn.java exists now. So we have Inside.Java, Dev.Java, Learn.Java. Learn.Java is very new.
And I think there are a bunch of great resources in dev.java, but those are more targeted towards somebody who maybe is an experienced Java developer, right?
Definitely.
And so the idea with learn.java is putting something there that are for learners and for educators, right? To try to make it easier for them and give them a good experience, kind of getting to the point where down the road they become an advanced developer who then can use dev.java. And I think another thing that we mentioned in the keynote is a partnership that we've had with the College Board, who make the advanced placement exams, one of which, very popular one, is the Computer Science A exam. That's been around for 20 years, and Java is the language for it. But the version of Java that was used for it up until now was fairly old. I think it was basically Java 8. And so now, nicely, we've done a bunch of work with them to kind of move that forward. But even more importantly was I had a person, Edward Biederman, the executive director for the computer science and for AP at the College Board, who basically said, hey, we get it. Like, computer science is different from many other subjects. A lot of the other subjects where they have AP exams, you put together the curriculum. It doesn't change that rapidly.
Basic math is pretty much settled, I would say.
Or like US history, like, sure, we're building new history every day, but most of what's in the AP exam is, kind of the same, right? And so computer science, though, and something like Java is not, right? And so he said, we get the fact that, when Oracle says, like, you're moving the language forward every 6 months, we took notice. And we're like, okay, we got to find a way to start to look at this. So super exciting, really, really compelling.
Yeah, I think it's really nice. So I'm a Java geek. I learned Java in high school and then university. And then I started working with that because that's what I knew. And then I really fell in love with the language and with its evolution. But to be perfectly honest, that might have happened if I would have learned another language back then. I don't know whether I would have the same positive reaction to it, but
Java was just intrinsically better than it. That's it, man.
Okay, so it's twice now you said, I'm sure you've talked about this already when I didn't. So that gives me the impression that maybe I missed a few important things. For a closing paragraph, something else that I might have already or should have already talked about, or are we good?
Wow, I don't know. Like, I don't know what you don't know.
Good point. Yes.
No, but the thing is, that's always the case. And so this is one of the reasons why, when we're thinking about evolving Java, we try to say, like, what can we do to make the things that can be predictable as possible?
Yeah.
So knowing when there are going to be releases coming out, knowing where you go to find out about the features in those releases, knowing that you can download, builds of those before they come out and try them out on your code and tell us about what you see. right? This is about making a, predictable backplane so where when you're running Java, we've got you. You're going to be good, right?
Yeah.
But that then means that we can focus on the really interesting and compelling part, which is what is the innovation, right?
Yeah.
And so also understanding where do I go to look at that and understand it, knowing about the projects that are stewarded by people from Oracle and others in OpenJDK. And so you can learn about where is the language going, in a year, 2 years, 4 years, and how can I take part if I want to and contribute to that.
Right. So I see your role then is a lot of just building that substrate, right? Where all the other folks can then build on and build amazing things.
Exactly.
I want to thank you for that, George, because it's clearly working well, at least from my perspective.
Thanks. I appreciate it.